The night air was thick with tension, the moon casting a pale glow over the forest clearing where the pack had gathered. Every eye was on her, and she could feel the weight of their gazes pressing down, heavy and judgmental. Her heart pounded in her chest, a wild rhythm that matched the fear and anticipation coursing through her veins. A beta stepped forward, his posture oozing arrogance, his gaze locked on hers with an icy cruelty, and the sharp edge in his voice cut through the murmurs of the pack. "You are unworthy of our pack," he sneered, his tone loud enough for everyone to hear, "and certainly unworthy of me." A hush fell over the clearing. Whispers rippled like a restless wind among the gathered wolves. Her cheeks burned with shame, and a tight knot of humiliation twisted in her stomach. She had hoped for respect, perhaps even admiration, but instead, she faced mockery and scorn in front of everyone she knew. And then, the air shifted. Heavy, commanding footsteps echoed across the clearing, making heads turn. The Alpha King had arrived. Every muscle in his frame radiated authority and power. His eyes burned with a light that seemed almost otherworldly. "Enough," he said, his voice cutting through the silence like steel. "No one humiliates a member of my pack without consequences." The beta's confident smirk faltered, replaced by a flash of fear and disbelief. The alpha advanced toward her, and the clearing seemed to hold its breath. Without warning, he pressed his mark upon her skin, a symbol of his claim, a sign of protection. The moonlight gleamed on the mark, illuminating it like a fiery brand against her pale skin. Shock and confusion swirled within her, mingled with a strange, burgeoning gratitude. Around her, the pack watched in stunned silence, some with envy, others with newfound respect. The beta shrank back, humiliated beyond belief, as the alpha's gaze lingered protectively on her. That night, beneath the silver glow of the moon, she understood that her life had irrevocably changed. What began as public humiliation had transformed into the first step of something far greater and far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. The forest seemed to hold its breath in the aftermath of the marking. Whispers ran like wildfire through the pack, every eye darting between her and the Alpha King. Some looked with awe, others with jealousy, but all were certain of one thing: nothing in the pack would ever be the same again. She stood frozen, her hand brushing over the mark that burned lightly against her skin. It was a strange sensation, part warmth, part thrill, part fear, an undeniable reminder that she now belonged to the Alpha in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The beta, still smoldering with humiliation, clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. His jaw tightened and his teeth ground together in rage that simmered beneath his composed exterior. The Alpha's eyes, sharp and unrelenting, swept over the pack with a silent command: respect, fear, authority. He moved with the kind of deliberate power that made the forest seem smaller, more confined, as though the very trees bent to his will. "Do you understand what this means?" he asked, his deep voice low but carrying to the farthest corners of the gathering. His gaze locked on hers, unyielding and commanding, and she could feel her pulse quicken. The Alpha wasn't asking for words. He was demanding acknowledgement, submission, not in a humiliating way, but in a way that recognized the unspoken hierarchy of power. I, her voice caught in her throat. She couldn't speak, not because she didn't want to, but because the intensity of his presence left her breathless. "Good," he said finally. a hint of a smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Learn quickly, or this world will chew you up and spit you out before you even realize what hit you. Around them, the beta shifted uncomfortably. He had always prided himself on being the pack's strongest, its most cunning. But here was the Alpha King, a living embodiment of power and dominance, reducing the beta to nothing more than a boy playing its strength. Rage and fear danced across the beta's features, and his lips twisted into a snarl. The alpha's attention returned to her. You have been marked. That mark isn't just a symbol. It's a protection, a warning, and a promise. But understand this, he added, his voice dropping to a growl. Your life is no longer your own. Your enemies, your rivals, even those who claim to be your friends, they will test you, push you, try to break you, and you must endure or fail. Her stomach tightened at his words. There was danger in every syllable, a thrill that coiled inside her like a living thing. She had always feared the pack, the politics, the power struggles, but now she was part of it, and part of him. A sudden rustle in the trees snapped her attention upward. Shadows flitted between the trunks, a silent witness to the alpha's arrival. Her instincts screamed caution. There were eyes watching her, eyes that didn't belong to the pack. Danger was closer than she realized. And though the alpha's presence was a shield, it wasn't a guarantee of safety. The alpha moved closer, his hand brushing lightly over the top of hers. The touch was brief, yet it sent a shiver down her spine. Remember, he murmured, strength comes not from the body alone, but from knowing who stands with you and who stands against you. The pack watched, silent and tense. The beta's glare burned hotter than the midday sun, filled with resentment that promised future battles. But in that moment, the forest, the moon, and every creature within it seemed to bow to the Alpha King's will. She swallowed hard, feeling a strange mix of fear, fascination, and undeniable attraction. She knew, instinctively, that the coming days would test her in ways she had never imagined. The Alpha's arrival was more than a rescue. It was a beginning. And beginnings, she knew, often came wrapped in danger. As the night deepened, the forest whispered secrets she could not yet understand, and she realized that being marked by the Alpha King was both a privilege and a curse. The pack would never see her the same way again, and neither would she. A clearing was bathed in the soft glow of the moon, shadows dancing across the faces of the gathered pack. Even after the Alpha's sudden arrival, tension hung in the air like a living thing, thick and suffocating. Tonight wasn't just any night. It was the night that would seal her fate, the night of the marking ceremony, an ancient ritual that bound her to the Alpha King in ways the pack would never forget. She stood at the center of the clearing, her heart hammering so violently it threatened to burst from her chest. Around her, the beta lingered, simmering with anger and humiliation. He had once fought her beneath his notice, a triviality in the hierarchy of power. But now, humiliated and powerless, he could only glare at her, his pride shattered in front of the entire pack. The Alpha King stepped forward, every movement precise, deliberate, radiating dominance. The air seemed to shift around him, carrying a chill that both warned and awed the pack. He studied her closely, his piercing eyes searching her soul, as though he could see the deepest corners of her fears, her doubts, and even the hidden sparks of strength she had not yet discovered. You understand why this is necessary, he said, his voice low, commanding, vibrating with an authority that made the beta flinch. This mark is more than a claim. It is protection, power, and a warning to those who would dare challenge what is mine. Her fingers brushed nervously against the spot where his hand had first grazed her skin. The sensation had lingered, a heat that seemed to pulse beneath the surface of her body. She had never felt anything like it before. The combination of fear, awe, and something she couldn't name. The alpha motioned to the pack. Several of the elder wolves stepped forward, carrying ceremonial oils and herbs, their faces solemn and respectful. The ceremony was not merely symbolic, it was a bond, an unbreakable link between the alpha and the one he marked. Every pack member understood its importance, and silence reigned, broken only by the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of a night bird. The beta's jaw tightened as he watched. He had prided himself on his own strength, but tonight he realized just how fragile his position was. The alpha's claim wasn't just about desire or whim. It was a public declaration of authority, a visible, undeniable act that cemented her place in the hierarchy above the beta's reach. Rage and envy flashed across the beta's face, though he forced himself to remain standing. The alpha knelt before her, his hands steady, and dipped them into the ceremonial mixture. He traced intricate, glowing patterns across her skin, the marks searing with a warmth that made her gasp involuntarily. Each line, each symbol, seemed to embed power into her very being, as though a part of him now resided within her. "You are mine," he whispered, his lips barely brushing her ear. The words were a promise, a warning, and a thrill all at once. And no one will challenge that without consequence. Her body shivered under the intensity of the ritual. She could feel the energy of the alpha flowing into her, anchoring her to the pack in ways she had never imagined. At the same time, a quiet but undeniable fear grew inside her. This bond came with responsibility, danger, and enemies, many of who were already watching, hidden in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike. The pack observed in rapt silence, some with awe, some with envy, and some, like the beta, with simmering resentment. It was clear to all of them that her life and her power had changed forever. When the ceremony concluded, the alpha rose, towering above her and the rest of the pack. He placed a hand lightly on her shoulder, the heat of his presence both protective and commanding. "Remember this moment," he said, his gaze sweeping over the beta and the pack alike. "This mark is not a gift, it is a claim, and any who challenge it will face consequences beyond imagination." As the pack slowly dispersed under the silver glow of the moon, she realized the truth. Her life was no longer hers. Danger lurked in every shadow, allies could turn into enemies, and every decision would now carry weight she had never borne before. Yet, beneath the fear, a flicker of excitement sparked within her. The marking had changed everything: her status, her fate, and her connection to the alpha. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that nothing, not even the beta's wrath, could undo what had begun tonight. The clearing had emptied, but the forest still buzzed with the echoes of the night's events. The marking ceremony was over, yet its consequences lingered like an invisible storm cloud. Word traveled quickly through the pack. Some whispered in awe, others in envy, and a few in barely concealed malice. The Alpha King's claim on her had shifted the balance of power, and every pair of eyes seemed to measure her worth or threat through a lens sharpened by jealousy. She walked through the pack's territory, her steps cautious but determined. Every shadow felt heavier now, every rustle of leaves a potential threat. Even as the thrill of the alpha's presence lingered, unease crept in. A beta's glare haunted her, smoldering, unrelenting, and unmistakably dangerous. He had never been denied in the way he had tonight, and the sting of humiliation would fester. She knew instinctively that his schemes were only beginning. A pack's whispers were relentless. She thinks she's safe now, but the Alpha King's protection isn't absolute. She has the mark, yet I sense weakness in her. Do you really believe she belongs to him? Each murmured word was a dagger aimed at her resolve, and though most were careful to hide their envy behind polite smiles, she could feel it slicing through the air like a knife. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to hold her head high, even as her heart raced. The Alpha had given her a shield, but it wasn't impenetrable, and the pack's politics were as treacherous as the wilderness surrounding them. Hours later, she found herself alone near the riverbank, the moon reflecting off the water in silver streaks. A cool breeze offered a brief comfort, carrying away some of the tension, but not the sense of impending danger. She crouched at the edge of the water, staring at the reflection of her own face, marked now, changed forever. Do you think you can handle it? The voice behind her was smooth, teasing, yet laced with the unmistakable authority of the Alpha King. She froze, feeling the familiar warmth of his presence before even seeing him. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. Vulnerability flickered inside her, a fragile thread woven with fear and anticipation. You will, he said, stepping closer. His shadow fell over her, and the world seemed to shrink until it was only the two of them. Strength isn't about size, speed, or even power alone. It's about knowing your position, understanding your enemies, and surviving their schemes. And you will survive, or I will ensure you do. She shivered both from his nearness and the weight of his words. The forest seemed to hold its breath once again, aware that a lesson was being imparted, one she would remember for the rest of her life. But even as the Alpha's presence grounded her, the whispers of the pack had not gone away. That night, as she returned to her den, she sensed eyes watching her from the shadows, figures moving with silent purpose. There was jealousy here, yes, but also fear and perhaps a hint of planning. Someone, or more than one, was waiting for the right moment to strike, and among all the whispers, the beta's name lingered like a curse. He had been humiliated, yes, but the Alpha's protection could only extend so far. His mind would be dangerous, calculating, patient. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden crack of a branch, sharp and close. Instincts heightened, muscles coiling for action, but it was only the wind. Or so she told herself. She knew better than to trust the calm of the night. Danger was never far in a world where power and jealousy ruled. Tonight had been a lesson in whispers, envy, and the sharp sting of jealousy. Tomorrow, she realized, would be the test of endurance, cunning, and survival. Every smile around her could hide a dagger. Every ally could become an adversary. And somewhere in the depths of the pack, plans were already unfolding, plans that might change everything before the next full moon rose. As she lay in her den, staring at the ceiling, her fingers brushed against the mark on her skin. It burned softly, a reminder that she was no longer invisible, no longer insignificant, and no longer unprotected. But she was also marked for challenge, for scrutiny, and for the perilous intrigue that thrived among the wolves who shared her world. The Alpha King had given her power, but the pack had given her enemies. And in the dark corners of the forest, the first shadows of danger began to stir. The forest was alive with the sounds of the night, rustling leaves, distant cries of nocturnal creatures, and the whispering wind that carried secrets through the dense trees. But tonight, she wasn't thinking about the serenity of nature. Her senses were alert, every nerve on edge. She had learned quickly that the pack's politics were only part of the danger. There were eyes watching from the shadows, silent, calculating, and unknown. The beta's humiliation still lingered like a bitter aftertaste. But there was something more pressing now, something subtler than his jealousy. She could feel it, the prickling awareness that someone or something was following her movements, a fleeting shadow between the trees. She stopped in her tracks and closed her eyes, letting her other senses take over. The rustle of a small branch, the faint pressure of disturbed earth, the barely audible whisper of a predator's breath in the night. All confirmed her fear. She was not alone. "Who's there?" she called softly, her voice steady but laced with tension. The forest answered with silence, though the shadows seemed to twist, as though mocking her uncertainty. A low growl suddenly cut through the quiet, and she spun, every muscle taut and ready. From behind a thick oak, a pair of eyes glinted in the moonlight, sharp, predatory, assessing. She froze, her instincts screaming to flee or fight. The alpha's mark burned against her skin, and she felt a rush of strength and courage that steadied her nerves. "You can't hide from what's coming," a voice whispered. It was low, almost a hiss, and sent a chill racing down her spine. She couldn't tell if it belonged to a wolf, a human, or something else entirely. Whoever or whatever it was, it had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment. Her thoughts immediately went to the pack. Could it be one of them? A rival plotting revenge? Or was it something outside the pack, a new threat? The beta's face flashed in her mind, twisted with resentment and fury. A forest seemed to close in around her, shadows stretching like claws across the ground. Every step she took was cautious, deliberate, her senses straining to detect any further movement. She remembered the alpha's words. Strength isn't just muscle or speed. It's knowing who stands with you and who stands against you. Right now, knowing her enemy could be the difference between survival and disaster. Suddenly, a branch snapped sharply behind her. She whirled, heart hammering, only to find the clearing empty. But the feeling of being watched intensified. It was like invisible eyes piercing through her, assessing, waiting, planning. She touched the mark on her skin, feeling its warmth pulse as if reacting to the presence of danger nearby. The alpha's protection was real, but it was not omnipresent. She had to be ready for what the night had in store. Hours passed, yet the shadows lingered, never fully revealing themselves. Each sound, the rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs, even the whisper of her own breath, felt amplified, magnified by the tension coiling within her. She realized that in the forest, threats were rarely obvious. They were hidden, patient, and deadly. The pack's jealousy had given her enemies, but the unseen danger lurking in the darkness was a threat she could not predict, control, or fight with raw strength alone. By dawn, exhaustion weighed heavily on her. She returned to the den, muscles sore, mind racing, heart still thrumming with adrenaline. Yet, even in the safety of her small refuge, she could not shake the feeling that eyes continued to watch her, somewhere just beyond sight. That night had taught her a vital lesson. The Alpha's mark brought protection, but it also drew attention. Attention from rivals, from enemies, and from predators whose motives were unknown. The forest had shifted, the pack had shifted, and she, marked, claimed, and powerful, was now a target in ways she could barely comprehend. As she lay down, staring at the ceiling of her den, a thought whispered in the back of her mind, cold and insistent. Not all threats wear their faces openly. Some wait, hidden in the dark, until the perfect moment to strike. And somewhere, deep in the shadows, a pair of eyes glimmered, calculating, patient, and hungry. The night had fallen deeper than ever, swallowing the forest in layers of darkness so thick that even the silver glow of the moon struggled to pierce through. She moved silently through the winding paths of the pack's territory, senses heightened, every step deliberate. The events of the marking, the beta's humiliation, and the lingering shadows of hidden threats had left her restless. Sleep was impossible tonight. Something told her that tonight, secrets long buried would emerge. The Alpha King had not been seen since the ceremony, his absence a weight she could feel pressing down on her. His marks still posed against her skin, a constant reminder of the bond they now shared. It was more than a symbol. It was a connection, a tether that drew her closer to him even in his absence. She could almost feel his presence, a silent promise that he watched, protected, and guided from afar. Yet tonight was different. The forest hummed with a tension she could not ignore. She crouched behind a thick cluster of trees, noticing a flicker of movement, a shadow slipping between trunks with predatory grace. Her instincts screamed caution, but curiosity and perhaps the pull of the Alpha's invisible guidance urged her forward. A sudden whisper drifted through the air, soft yet unmistakable. "You shouldn't be here." Her body froze, heart hammering in her chest. The voice was smooth, low, and edged with authority. Not the beta, not anyone she recognized, but a stranger, or perhaps someone she thought she knew. Shadows shifted along the path ahead, revealing a figure cloaked in darkness. She could not see the eyes, but she could feel them, calculating, dangerous, piercing right through her. "Who are you?" she demanded, trying to steady her voice, though it trembled slightly. The figure stepped closer, gliding silently over the forest floor. "That is not important yet. What matters is that you know the truth, even if it terrifies you." Period. Her stomach twisted. The mark burned faintly, a dull heat that seemed to respond to the stranger's presence. She realized with a shiver that this figure knew something about the Alpha King, about the pack, perhaps even about her. And that knowledge was dangerous. "Secrets are everywhere," the figure whispered, almost to themselves. "Some you'll hear, some you'll discover, and some you will wish you had never known." Suddenly, the shadows parted, revealing another presence behind the first. Two figures, both cloaked, both silent, both exuding a power that rivaled the Alpha's. Fear prickled at the edges of her mind. If these were allies, they were hidden ones. If they were enemies, she was already surrounded, the darkness pressing in from all sides. "You're marked," the first figure said, voice low, almost reverent. "And that mark makes you more than just a member of the pack. It makes you a target, a key, a weapon, and a puzzle." She took a step back, her mind racing. The Alpha's protection was strong, yes, but he could not be everywhere. And the pack, with all its jealous eyes and hidden agendas, had its limits. Alone, she was vulnerable. Alone, she could be discovered, tested, even destroyed. The second figure finally spoke, their tone icy, deliberate. "Do not trust what you see. Not every ally wears a friendly face. Not every enemy is obvious. And some truths are better left buried." Her pulse surged. She realized that the night had changed, that the forest was no longer just a home or a sanctuary. It was a labyrinth of secrets and dangers, and she, marked by the Alpha King, was at the center of it all. Before she could react further, the figures melted into the shadows, leaving her alone with the whispers of the trees and the echo of their cryptic warning. The moon reflected off her skin, the mark glowing faintly, a beacon of her bond and her vulnerability alike. She sank to the forest floor, clutching her knees, mind racing. The Alpha had prepared her in ways she didn't yet understand. But these shadows, these hidden figures, had opened a window into a deeper, darker layer of the pack, a layer she had not been ready for. And she knew instinctively that tonight's secrets were only the beginning. Somewhere in the darkness, eyes followed her still, patient, waiting for the moment when she would slip, when fear would overtake courage, when vulnerability would be exposed. Tonight, the forest had whispered its first secrets, but the night had many more to tell, and she would need every ounce of strength, every shred of cunning, and every flicker of courage to survive what was coming. Because some truths, she realized with a shiver, were deadly. A morning mist clung to the forest like a fragile veil, drifting through the trees and concealing shadows that moved with silent intent. The pack stirred, their movements cautious, as though the night itself had whispered warnings into their ears. But one thing had changed irrevocably. The balance of power had shifted. Her mark from the Alpha King was more than a claim. It was a declaration, a challenge, and to some, an insult that could not be answered. The Beta had not spoken to her since the ceremony, but his presence was felt in every glance, every calculated movement. His fury had not faded. It had only grown, simmering beneath the surface, like a wolf ready to strike. And now, the pack's murmurs carried a new tension, subtle but undeniable. Eyes darted, alliances shifted, and whispers hinted at betrayal. She walked carefully through the clearing, alert to every sound. The forest was quiet, too quiet. Even the birds seemed hesitant to call out. She had learned to trust her instincts, but now a creeping doubt gnawed at her. Not all threats were obvious. Not all enemies bore fangs. And some betrayal came from the most unexpected corners. It was the council meeting that confirmed her fears. The elders had gathered to discuss matters of the pack, but their glances, subtle gestures, and hushed tones betrayed something far more sinister. She stood at the edge, observing, listening. "He's not what he seems," one elder murmured, barely audible. She has been marked, yes, but is she truly loyal? Do not underestimate her, another countered, but there was hesitation, a crack in their conviction. Her pulse quickened. Loyalty, or the appearance of it, was a fragile commodity in the pack. And she realized, with a chill that ran down her spine, that some of the wolves she had thought allies were now calculating her value, measuring her weaknesses, and perhaps plotting against her. Beta's presence loomed over her periphery, silent but dangerous. His mind, she knew, was sharp, relentless, and unforgiving. Humiliation had ignited something within him. A need to reclaim honor, to undo the Alpha's claim, to strike where it hurt most. She could feel it in the way he watched her. Every flicker of expression charged with venom. The Alpha King appeared then, moving into the clearing with the authority of a storm. His eyes swept across the council, then settled on her. The connection between them was unspoken but powerful. A tether of strength that gave her courage even as the forest seemed to close in with suspicion. Trust is earned, not given, he said, his voice low but carrying the weight of command. And loyalty is tested by fire. Beware who walks beside you and who smiles in your face while hiding daggers in their hearts. Her heart clenched. The warning was clear. The pack was no longer a place of safety. Allies could be enemies, friends could betray, and the shadows of treachery were as deadly as any predator in the forest. That night, as darkness fell, she wandered the edges of the pack's territory, senses strained to their limits. Every rustle, every whisper of wind, every flicker of movement made her pulse race. And then she sighed, a subtle, almost imperceptible sign of betrayal. A wolf she had trusted, someone who had always appeared loyal, now lingered near the Beta, exchanging glances that spoke of collusion. Her stomach twisted. The pack's hierarchy was a delicate web, and the threads were fraying. A Beta's desire for revenge had found accomplices, wolves whose loyalty was bought by fear, envy, or ambition. She returned to the Alpha, breathless but determined, and relayed what she had discovered. His eyes narrowed, stormy and unreadable. "I suspected as much," he said, voice low, his hand brushing hers in reassurance. "Betrayal is the truest test of loyalty, and tonight we will find out who stands with us and who falls against us." As the moon rose high above the forest, she felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. She had been marked, claimed, and empowered, but the cost of survival was growing heavier with each passing hour. Alliances were fragile, enemies were clever, and the Alpha's protection, though formidable, could not prevent betrayal from within. Somewhere in the shadows, the Beta and his hidden allies watched, waiting for the perfect moment. And she, standing at the edge of the clearing, realized that the night was not just filled with danger. It was filled with deceit, plotting, and treachery that could strike at any moment. Tonight, the forest whispered a single chilling truth. In the pack, trust was the rarest and deadliest commodity of all. The pack had never felt so tense. The night hung heavy over the forest, a silent blanket that concealed more than it revealed. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, every distant call of a nocturnal creature was amplified, echoing in her mind like a warning. The betrayal she had sensed in the previous days had not been idle. It had been growing, coiling like a predator ready to strike. She walked through the clearing, the mark on her skin throbbing faintly, pulsing with the alpha's presence and protection. Even so, she could feel the shadows of deceit pressing against her, the hidden eyes of those who had already plotted, already schemed. Something was coming, and it was imminent. A sharp, ear-piercing scream shattered the night, cutting through the calm like a blade. Wolves bolted from their dens. "There," Sumyun shouted, pointing toward the forest edge. She ran, her pulse hovering, following the chaotic swirl of the pack toward the disturbance. When she arrived, the scene that greeted her was chaos incarnate. One of the pack's elders lay sprawled on the forest floor, a deep gash marking the side of their neck, blood pooling into the roots of an ancient tree. Panic rippled through the pack, raw fear mingled with disbelief. Abeda stood at a distance, eyes wide, but not with shock. No, his expression was careful, calculated, as though he had anticipated such chaos. Something deep inside her twisted. Could he have orchestrated this? Was this his revenge? Or something far more dangerous? Something she had yet to comprehend. The alpha knelt beside the injured elder, his hands glowing faintly with power as he assessed the wound. "It's deliberate," he muttered, voice low, sharp as steel. "Someone wanted this, and they wanted it to be witnessed." His gaze swept across the pack, landing briefly on the beta, then returning to her. "Stay close. Danger is no longer hidden. It has arrived." Her heart pounded. The forest had shifted from whispers of jealousy to acts of violence. And now, the stakes were higher than she had ever imagined. Every wolf was a potential witness, every movement a clue, and every shadow a possible threat. She followed the alpha as he moved through the pack, commanding, directing, organizing. His presence was a shield, yet it also illuminated the darkness. Not every wolf was reacting out of fear or loyalty. Some were watching, calculating, their eyes gleaming with intentions they hid too well. A sudden movement caught her attention. From the shadows, a figure slipped silently away, avoiding the alpha's notice. She froze, recognition dawning. This was not a stranger. This was someone from within the pack, someone she had trusted, someone whose loyalty had seemed unquestionable. "Oh, was that?" she whispered to the alpha, tension threading her voice. He didn't answer immediately, his eyes scanning the clearing with lethal precision. Someone who wants to be invisible, but no one moves unnoticed forever. His hand brushed hers, a brief touch that grounded her, even as the adrenaline surged. "Watch carefully. Observe. Learn. This is how we catch them." Hours passed as the pack combed the forest. Every footstep, every whisper of wind, every rustle of leaves was a potential clue. She felt her senses sharpening, her instincts honed by fear and the alpha's teachings. By the time the first light of dawn filtered through the treetops, the initial chaos had settled. But the danger had not passed. The Alpha King gathered the pack and spoke, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a blade. "This act was deliberate," he said, "and the one who did this is still among us. They believe they can hide, deceive, and escape justice. But we will find them, and when we do, The consequences will be greater than any of you can imagine." Her pulse raced. The forest, once a home, had become a battleground of suspicion, fear, and intrigue. Every shadow was a threat, every glance a potential clue, and every heartbeat a reminder that the criminal had struck and that the hunt was only beginning. As she looked around at the pack, her eyes lingering on the beta and the others whose loyalty seemed uncertain, she understood a terrifying truth. The crime had not only shaken the pack, it had exposed the fragility of trust, the danger of ambition, and the depths of human or wolf deceit. And somewhere, hidden in the shadows, the perpetrator was watching, waiting, confident that they had eluded capture. For now, a hunt had begun. The forest had transformed overnight. Where the moonlight had once danced softly on leaves, now shadows stretched long and menacing, every corner a potential hiding place for the one who had struck the pack. Silence hung thick between the trees, broken only by the soft padding of paws and the occasional whisper of wind. The Alpha King led the hunt with a calculated precision, each movement purposeful, each glance sharp and unyielding. She moved at his side, heart hammering, senses stretched to their limits. The mark on her skin pulsed faintly, a reminder of their bond, of the Alpha's presence, and of the responsibility she now carried. This was no ordinary hunt. This was a test of perception, patience, and cunning. Every wolf in the pack was on edge, and she knew that even a single misstep could lead to disaster. The Alpha paused, ears twitching, his eyes scanning the underbrush. "I've been careful," he murmured, almost to himself. "But no one hides forever. Not from me, not from us." His hand brushed hers briefly, grounding her, giving her courage, and reminding her that she was not alone. The forest seemed to pulse with tension. Every rustle, every broken twig, every distant cry made her jump, her pulse spiking. She realized that this hunt was more than just finding a criminal. It was a revelation. Trust had fractured, alliances had shifted, and she had to learn to read every subtle sign, every gesture, every hidden intent. "Stay alert," the Alpha said, his voice low but commanding. "The culprit is clever, patient, and desperate." Hours passed, and the forest became a maze of shadows and suspicion. She noticed subtle signs, a crushed branch here, footprints too precise there, and the faintest scent of blood lingering in the air. It was as though the perpetrator wanted to be found, leaving breadcrumbs to see if the pack could follow. The beta lurked at the edges, his eyes bright with something she couldn't yet maim, resentment, curiosity, or maybe his own hidden agenda. She kept her distance, aware that the hunt was not just for the criminal outside the pack, but for the loyalties within it. Suddenly, a movement caught her eye. A figure darted between the trees, quick and deliberate. "There!" she shouted, pointing. The Alpha's form blurred as he sprang forward, moving like liquid shadow, his presence a force of unstoppable power. She followed, her own movements quick and precise, the thrill of the chase igniting something deep within her. The figure twisted, ducking behind a boulder, then leapt into the darkness. The scent of fear, or perhaps confidence, lingered in the air. "I know we are close," the Alpha said, voice sharp as steel. "But the closer they run, the tighter the trap becomes." She felt her heart in her throat, adrenaline flooding her body, every nerve alert. She had never felt such danger, such intensity, and yet, beneath the fear, a spark of exhilaration. This hunt was more than a pursuit. It was a revelation of strength, a test of courage, and a glimpse into the dark heart of the pack's hidden politics. Hours blurred into each other as the forest swallowed the daylight, then gave way to the silver glow of the rising moon. She noticed subtle signs. A footprint slightly off from the path, a faint rustle that didn't belong, and the ever-present unseen gaze of the culprit. At last, near the edge of the territory where the forest met jagged cliffs, they cornered the figure. A tense silence fell, broken only by the alpha's commanding growl. "There's nowhere left to run," he said, his presence towering, his eyes burning with absolute authority. "Surrender, and no further harm will come to you. Resist, and you will face justice beyond mercy." The figure hesitated, a shadow trembling at the edge of the clearing, calculating, cornered, yet still dangerous. And in that instant, she understood the truth of the alpha's words. Power, control, and cunning were all tests, and survival depended not only on strength, but on the ability to see through deception, to anticipate betrayal, and to act decisively. Her pulse raced, the mark on her skin burning faintly, a beacon and a shield. The hunt was nearly over, but the danger was far from gone. The forest seemed to hold its breath, the pack silent in tense anticipation. And somewhere deep in the shadows, the criminal waited, knowing that one wrong move could decide everything. The night had revealed the first layer of deception, but the final confrontation, the reckoning, was still to come. The forest was eerily silent, the kind of silence that pressed against the chest and whispered of hidden dangers. Even the Alpha King's presence, commanding and unyielding, could not erase the tension that hung in the air like a living entity. The hunt for the culprit had narrowed the field, but tonight a deeper truth began to surface, one that would change the dynamics of the pack forever. She moved carefully beside the Alpha, senses sharp, muscles coiled with anticipation. Every snap of a twig, every distant rustle made her pulse race. The Alpha's hand brushed briefly against hers, grounding her, reminding her that she was not alone. Suddenly, a rustling behind a dense cluster of trees caught her attention. She froze, instincts screening danger. The Alpha's eyes narrowed, scanning, calculating, reading the forest like it were an open book. In one fluid movement, he disappeared into the shadows, leaving her momentarily alone, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. She advanced cautiously, and what she saw made her stomach tighten. A wolf she had trusted, someone who had smiled and guided her in previous days, was crouched low, exchanging urgent whispers with the beta. The realization hit her like ice. Betrayal ran deeper than she had imagined. These were not mere whispers of jealousy or envy. They were plans, deliberate and dangerous, hatched to destabilize the pack and perhaps even harm her. Her breath caught. The Alpha's mark burned faintly, a heat that reminded her of the bond. She understood now that survival was not simply about strength. It was about vigilance, perception, and reading the hidden layers of intention. Then, the forest seemed to shift. A beta stepped into a moonbeam, eyes blazing with resentment and fury, his jaw tight, lips twisted with the hunger for revenge. "You think you're safe with him?" he hissed under his breath, the venom in his words unmistakable. "You've been marked, yes, but the pack still watches. You're vulnerable, and I will not forget." Before she could react, the Alpha returned, his presence a tidal wave of power that filled the clearing. The beta flinched slightly, a flicker of doubt passing over his face, though his anger still smoldered. The alpha's eyes swept across the gathered wolves, sharp, calculating, and unforgiving. "Enough," he commanded, voice low and dangerous. "A time for whispers has ended. The time for truth is here." One by one, secrets began to unravel. The wolves who had hidden their loyalties, who had whispered in shadows, were revealed through subtle clues. She watched, heart pounding, as alliances shifted, masks fell, and the depth of deception within the pack became painfully clear. The beta's eyes locked on hers, a storm of fury and wounded pride swirling within them. But she had grown stronger, sharper, more aware of the subtle currents of danger. She would not be intimidated, not even by him. The alpha's presence bolstered her confidence, his silent strength guiding her even as betrayal twisted through the night like a venomous river. Suddenly, a figure bolted from the underbrush, the true culprit, caught off guard but still defiant. Her heart leapt. The alpha sprang forward, a shadow of unstoppable force, and she followed, moving with a precision born of fear, training, and instinct. A chase was tense, a dance of danger, speed, and cunning. Every step brought the truth closer. Every movement revealed a hidden layer of the criminal's plan. Every breath carried the risk of attack. When the culprit finally stumbled and was cornered beneath the moonlight, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The alpha loomed above, eyes burning with authority and judgment, while she watched, a witness to weeks of fear, suspicion, and deception. "Your lies, your schemes, your betrayals end here," the alpha intoned, his voice low, final, and impossibly powerful. "No one harms my pack and walks away unpunished." The criminal's defiance faltered, eyes darting to her, perhaps realizing the full weight of the alpha's protection. A hidden networks of betrayal, deception, and ambition had been exposed, leaving only the raw truth. Justice would be served, but only after the darkness within the pack had been fully revealed. She exhaled, a mixture of relief and lingering tension coursing through her body. The night had been a revelation, not just of the criminal's identity, but of the hidden dangers that lurked within the pack, the precariousness of trust, and the depth of the alpha's power and reach. As the first light of dawn touched the treetops, she understood something vital. Survival was no longer about hiding, avoiding danger, or merely following orders. It was about awareness, intuition, and courage. The courage to face betrayal, deception, and the unknown. And in the shadows, even as the criminal was trapped and exposed, she knew the forest still held secrets, waiting for the right moment to emerge. The air was thick with tension as the forest seemed to hold its breath. Every leaf, every branch, every whisper of wind felt alive with anticipation. The pack had gathered in the central clearing, the full moon hanging overhead like a silent sentinel. Its silver light illuminated the faces of wolves, tense with fear, anger, and determination. Tonight, there would be no more shadows, no more hidden agendas. The final confrontation had arrived. She stood at the edge of the clearing, the mark on her skin burning faintly with the alpha's power. Every nerve in her body screamed alert, her senses sharpened to their maximum. The Alpha King was beside her, his presence a towering force of authority. His eyes swept over the pack, assessing, calculating, and preparing for what was to come. Even the beta, coiled with anger and jealousy, seemed hesitant under the alpha's gaze. The criminal, the architect of chaos within the pack, stepped into the clearing with a defiant glare. Flanked by a few hidden allies whose loyalty had been revealed during the previous hunt, fear flickered behind their eyes, but it was masked with arrogance and calculated bravado. They believed they could challenge the alpha, disrupt the pack, and escape retribution. They were wrong. The alpha's voice cut through the night, low and commanding, carrying the weight of power and judgment. You have sown betrayal, caused harm, and disrupted the balance of this pack. Tonight, justice will be served, and no shadow will hide your crimes. The criminal sneered, but her instincts screamed danger. She could feel the tension in the air, thick and electric, as though the forest itself was waiting for the inevitable clash. She stayed close to the alpha, every movement precise, every step deliberate. Her mark burned stronger now, a reminder of her connection to him, her place within the hierarchy, and the strength she had gained. Suddenly, the criminal lunged, fast and desperate, aiming to strike before the pack could react. The alpha moved with impossible speed, intersecting the attack with a controlled force that sent the assailant staggering. But the criminal's allies surged forward, and chaos erupted in the clearing. Growls, snapping jaws, and the sound of claws striking the earth filled the night. She sprang into action, instincts guiding her as she moved with precision, avoiding attacks, disarming threats, and protecting the pack wherever she could. The forest blurred around her, adrenaline and fear sharpening her senses, every rustle and snap telling her where danger lurked. Beta charged from the shadows, not to attack her, but to challenge the alpha directly, his rage boiling over. Their clash was explosive, a storm of power and fury that shook the clearing. She watched, heart pounding, as the alpha held firm, countering each strike with control. It was a demonstration of dominance, skill, and power, reminding her of the distance between raw anger and true strength. Amid the chaos, she noticed the criminal attempting to slip away, a desperate move to escape justice. With a burst of speed, she intercepted them, her presence and the mark on her skin compelling the criminal to halt. She held them at bay until the alpha reached her side, his hand firmly gripping her shoulder, grounding her even as the storm of the fight continued. "Step back!" he commanded, his voice a growl that carried over the chaos. "The rest will be handled." Together, they watched as the alpha's dominance took hold. The criminal's allies faltered under his authority, and the beta, though furious, could not match the leader. One by one, the threats crumbled, leaving only the main culprit, trapped and powerless beneath the moonlight. The alpha's gaze turned to her, a silent question in his eyes. She met his look, confidence and determination reflecting in her own. She had survived, she had learned, and she had stood beside him. Together, they had faced betrayal, danger, and chaos, and had emerged stronger. The alpha stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on the criminal's shoulder. "You have one chance," he said, voice low and unyielding. "Confess, accept justice, and perhaps the consequences will."